Welcome to the Sharpway Show. A little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So happy to have you with me this evening. And it's a very interesting show. It is a show today to talk about something that I know some of you have brought up in the past. I grew up in the past, but never in any type of detail. We talk often about change and how can we fix things in America? How can we make things happen, right? Oh, is the voting working? Is it not working? All those types of things. Well, there is an idea that people have come up with and been working at for a while. It's the idea of a convention of states. So, well, am I going to sit here and preach to you? I'm not. I brought someone else who can preach far better than me. I brought the man who is the president of the Convention of States Foundation and the Convention of States Action Group, which is the man himself, Mark Meckler. Mark, how are you, sir?
I am great. I'm even better now that I'm with you.
There we go. Life is good. I love that. Absolutely outstanding. So I guess the reason why I've been thought of you, obviously, is I first heard of your organization probably in 2017. I'm thinking that area, 2016, 2017. And I was scared. I thought the idea of a convention of states would be, oh, my God, the communists are going to turn us into Russia. That's literally what I thought. I was like, you can't do it. They're going to turn us to Russia. But I actually met, I don't know, one of your very motivated people at some of the events in New York State when I was running for governor. And the first time I met one of them, I was like, oh, okay, nice, whatever. They want me to sign the thing. I wouldn't sign it. I was like, and I left. But as I was crossing the state, I kept meeting people that were telling me the same thing. And it began to land. I would ask a question, and they wouldn't just yell, Democrats are bad. They actually had an answer. And I thought, wait a minute. They have an answer? They didn't just yell Democrats are bad, it's true. But they didn't just yell that. They actually were giving me an answer. And I thought, And by about the third time, I was on board and I signed. So I've already signed the petition. I've already done it. So I thought, wow, this may be an answer. So it took me some time to come there. I mean, people must tell you that. You probably don't get someone to say yes right away, do you? Or is it that easy? Am I the oddball or am I the normal or what?
I'd say you're right in the middle. So look, we get people who think we want to take power away from the federal government. That's what you say this is all about. So I'm all in, and I do think I appreciate that. That's not the thoughtful approach. The approach that you had is skeptical. As somebody who has been involved in politics for 14 years, I'm pretty much skeptical of everything. And so my natural reaction is like, well, hold on a second. Explain this to me. And I'm like you. I want to hear it from a few people that I respect. I want to hear it in a rational, cogent way so that I can understand it. So I think you're kind of right in the middle on the approach.
There we go. So I feel like your story is far tougher than mine. I know you were a Tea Party guy for a while. You were all about, hey, we're going to get people elected. We're going to make change. And the change that you wanted and expected just didn't come. But for so many people who I know in the Tea Party movement, many of them, and you know this, I'm sure, gave up. Just went, you know what? Doesn't work. To hell with them, out. And they checked out or they went to something else. But you didn't do that. You kind of turned this from frustration into hope. And this is where you came. Tell me about that, if you would.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, it sucked. That's what happened.
Yes.
My wife and I poured our life into the Tea Party movement, literally to the point, Larry, to the edge of bankruptcy. I'm a lawyer by training. We'd put away a nice little nest egg. I didn't know anything about running a nonprofit. We didn't know how to raise money. We never even thought about it. I know how to make money. I know how to spend money, build stuff, but I didn't know how to raise money in a nonprofit.
Right.
And so we spent all our own money to help build up the Tea Party movement. And then in 2010, we elect the largest swing class since 1938 from Democrats to Republicans. Look, I learned in 8th grade that everything would change, right? You elect people who say they're going to do what you want. They believe in smaller government. They believe in less spending. They believe in a less intrusive government. So that's what we think we're going to get. And then literally we got none of that. And so it's really disheartening because I traveled all over the country. I was away from my kids and my wife a lot. We sacrificed a lot to help make that happen. And then to get sort of a big zero on the scoreboard after a big election, it was really disheartening. So yeah, I could have been one of those people who walked away. I was actually just really blessed by a mentor, a guy who came into my life. It's become a really good friend of mine, a guy out of West Texas. And he said, yeah, you can't quit because we've got to figure out how to fix the country. If you walk away, and I think you and I know your story really well, Larry. I think you and I are a lot alike. We don't do politics because we want to be politicians.
Right.
Right. We do politics because
Right.
we love our state. We love our country. We believe in
Absolutely.
the American people. And so he just said, look, if you walk away, then you're giving up on America, and you've developed a bunch of influence. You have a network. Let's see if we can figure out how to use it to save the country. And we did a couple of things because I had no idea what to do. First, I raised $1 million and I gave it away to grassroots groups in the Tea Party movement who got nothing out of the movement. So mom and pop, people who had 500 people in their local group, nobody ever gave them a dime. We gave them money. So $1 million we gave away. The second thing I did is we actually sued the IRS on behalf of all the Tea Party groups that got targeted by the IRS. So people remember,
that's right. Yes,
Yep.
that's right.
So people remember Lois Lerner. Like
Yep.
I consider her sort of the arch enemy. I'm still unhappy that she's not in jail. We're not done yet with that. But we sued the IRS in a class action lawsuit, raised all the money to do that. All the fancy DC TV lawyers, they got nothing. We got $3.7 million. It's the only class action settlement I'm ever aware of the IRS getting in on or having to pay out. So they did that. And then I met a guy by the name of Mike Ferris. And Mike Ferris is the founder of the homeschool movement in America. And literally in the 70s, it was illegal in all 50 states.
Yep.
And he said, as a parent, and I would say this is a very libertarian ideal is, hey, look, we should have the right to educate our own kids if we want to.
100%.
It seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious at the time. So he fought that fight, founded Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which seemed impossible. And so he came to me with what I would describe as an impossible idea. He said, look, Mark, you think the problem is the people in DC, but it's not. It's a structure problem.
Yes.
We broke the structure of our system of government. I would say, Larry, this is something you can relate to I know you're a successful business consultant. You go in and look at a business. If the structure's wrong, there's only so much you can do, right? Good
100%.
people in a bad structure, you get a bad result. So he pointed out to me that there was a way in Article 5 of the Constitution to change the structure of the system of governance, take it back to something closer to what it was when the Constitution was framed. And I was in. That gave me hope that it wasn't just the electoral system, which clearly was broken. There was another way to fix our country.
I love that idea. I'm glad. So let me ask then, I guess, the idea sounds like a great one, but I think most people kind of don't know how it works, right? It's like, okay, so then does Congress like vote on something? Like they don't really know what it means. Can you, without going too crazy, can you kind of give us a concept of how does this Article 5 work? How does it work? What happens?
And I think if you don't know how it works, if somebody doesn't know how it works, they shouldn't be embarrassed by that. I came out of law school and didn't know about Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 has two ways to amend the Constitution. One is Congress proposes amendments and then the states ratify. And the way we've never used is that the states can call a convention. It takes 2/3 of the states to call a convention. And then if a majority of the states in the convention want to propose amendments, those amendments go out to the states for ratification in the same way they would if Congress proposed it. And why this is so important is Congress will never propose amendments to reduce its own terms or limit its own terms or limit its authority or limit its ability to spend money, because human beings like power and they like to centralize power. And so if we as folks out in the states believe that DC has too much power, there's too much centralized authority, the only way we can fix it is if we, the people through our states, call a convention. So when 34 states say they want to call a convention, they do that by passing resolutions in both houses. Then the states convene a convention and they talk about the ways that they want to impose limits on the federal government. That's what we're engaged in right now, that effort.
Got it. So if you get 34 states, their legislators to agree, there'll be a physical convention, meaning people will physically go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So somewhere Congress has a role. Its only role is to name the time and place. So they'll say, 90 days from now, I guarantee they're going to say Washington, D.C., but the convention retains authority to move itself. Everybody I've talked to in the states, they'll move it to somewhere like Kansas City or Dallas, somewhere central in the country. And then the states will gather and they'll start to debate. It'll operate a lot like a legislature.
Got it. Okay. Wow. So when that happens, let me ask, what's the fear? I mean, I was always afraid that if we have this happen, everyone will show up and they'll be like, okay, let's end the Second Amendment. Let's curb the First Amendment, right? Let's just start chopping all the stuff up that's going to make every libertarian want to jump out of their skin, right? That's, of course, what I'm worried about. Now, I know that some of that's not real fear, but tell me what is a real fear, or real concern, I should say. And then what kind of fears do people tell you that's really not a real fear?
Look, I think if that's your first reaction, and I call myself a conservatarian, so I'm a little bit of both. And I think that's a reasonable first reaction. We've never done this before. If you don't know anything about it and you think, whoa, wait, hold on a second, people are going to start messing with the Constitution. That sounds pretty bad because we love the Constitution. It's what's given us, protected our liberty over these almost 250 years. So I don't think it's irrational that that's people's first reaction. But once you know about the process, you understand that none of those things can happen. So first of all, remember 34 states have to call a convention. So that's a super majority of the states, right? It's not 26, which would be a majority. It's a big super majority. They have to agree in advance what is the subject matter of the convention. In our case, there are 3 subject matters. It's anything that would impose term limits on elected officials, but also on the deep state. We got a problem.
I like that.
Right. So you could call it the Fauci Amendment. Fauci shouldn't have been there for 40 plus years. Right. So deep state, bureaucrats, staffers, and the judiciary. The longer judges sit on the federal bench, the more they like big government. Every study shows this. So we could limit that. So first is term limits. Second is anything that would limit the federal government's fiscal authority. So they're out of control. We all know they spend more than they take in. We're going deeper and deeper in debt. It's immoral, it's unethical, and it's unsustainable. So we can put a balanced budget in place, tax caps, spending caps. We can impose, and you'll like this as a business guy, generally accepted accounting principles on the federal government.
That'd be nice.
They have no accounting principles, literally.
That's correct. None.
And then the last thing is the one that I like the most. It says we can limit the scope and jurisdiction of the federal government. And this is where the federal government's gotten so out of control. They had 17 enumerated powers when the government was formed by the Constitution in 1787, as ratified in 89. Now they have, I don't know how many, 17 million, because the courts have given them all this power. And so we could say things like, nope, the federal government can't be in education or energy or healthcare or the environment. These are things that were never meant for the federal government. And frankly, much to my chagrin, the states are involved in all of this stuff. So you get the federal government out of it, and then we work it out at home in our own state. So these are the things that are the limitations on the convention. And then lastly, let's presume that everything I said doesn't work, that people go to convention, the states send their delegates. We could talk about how all that works. And then those delegates just decide, which would be bizarre, but in front of the whole nation, we're just going to do whatever we want. We're going to ignore our states. We're going to ignore the subject matter. Let's say that they decide to repeal the Second Amendment. Well, it takes 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of the convention. The convention is a suggestion.
Okay, so hold on. So the convention doesn't pass the actual amendment. It doesn't.
No. It's just
okay.
I call it a suggesting convention. People get together in a meeting and they say, hey, we think you guys should all look at this. And then the states look at it. Now it takes a super majority. Instead of 34 to get in convention, it takes 38 states, 3/4 of states to ratify.
Got it.
Okay. So, Larry, this is really important. Anytime somebody says to you, well, they're going to take away the Second Amendment, I always say this. I'll say it on your show. I'll give out my personal email address. List the 38 states that will ratify something you don't like. And the answer is you can't, because there's nothing crazy that 38 states would ratify. By the way, on the left or the right, there's nothing 38 states would ratify. It's going to have to be something very mainstream.
Got it. And I think most people, this is the part that I like about this, right? I have people right now in New York State who are trying to push for something similar to state level. They're trying to push for basically public referendums, right? That style to get past the bureaucracy and deep state of the state government. This is kind of similar in a way, right? It's kind of like the states getting around the bureaucracy of the federal government. And I think most people in America, if you ask them, should we have term limits? The vast majority are going to say yes. I don't care if it's a red state, blue state. Most are going to say yes. Most people will. I mean, there's some who like their kings. There's some, but most don't. They actually like the idea of term limits. My only worry, and to be forward, I agree with you on this. My worry would be, do most people think that the bureaucrats shouldn't stay when a lot of their family and friends are bureaucrats? I'm not sure about that one. I mean, I hope they will, but I don't know.
The numbers are about the same because there are a lot of bureaucrats. Remember, first of all, we're talking about federal level. So when you say most people or a lot of people have friends and family that are bureaucrats, for most of us, that's people at the state level. This has nothing to do with term limits on the state. The state can do whatever they want in true federalist fashion, which I love. I come from California originally. I'm a Texan now, but California and New York, very parallel, huge bureaucracies, right? We may not be able to do away with those in states like New York and California, but that's federalism. That's the way it works. Right. And I'm in favor of that. I may not like the policy outcome, but if I don't like that, then my job is to do something like you did and actually run for governor.
Which is crazy, but yes. But yes, absolutely. Let me do a little bit of admin if I could.
Yeah.
If you're watching this show right now and you like what you're hearing, then do me a favor, click that like button. I have to get past Mr. Go Rhythm, Al Go Rhythm. That guy really bothers me constantly. He's always trying to cut me up. So please do me a favor, help me out so I can get past Mr. Al Go Rhythm and hit that like button. If you haven't already, please do so. If you're watching on Twitter right now, awesome. Do me a favor, retweet this right now. Don't stop looking at me. I know we're both good looking men. That's fine. Doesn't stop that. Hit retweet right now. Retweet it. It does matter. If you want your comment to come to the front, you can always super chat me if you're watching on YouTube at Larry Sharp YouTube. It's okay. If you want to support the show, so I spend more time doing this and less time consulting, that's okay. You can do that. Head over to patreon.com/sharpway. Give me $10 a month so I can keep doing this. That'd be awesome. But more importantly, Mark came in here. He's given us some love, so give him some love. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Meckler, or even better, go see what he's talking about. Head on over to conventionofstates.com and see what he's doing. All the details are in the description in both Facebook and on YouTube. Check him out. See what he's doing. If you're interested, join up, help him out, right? If it makes sense to you, go ahead and help him out. He's here giving us some love. At a minimum, follow him on Twitter and see what he's doing. So I want to grab a couple of comments. The people are commenting here. If I can grab a couple of them.
Yeah, please.
Wow, so many. Let me just grab this. It's interesting here. Joe says, does the Convention of States convene to do a specific thing, or is it open for any changes? Meaning that even though you had those 3 items, can I now come in true, Robert's rules and say, I want to make an amendment to the rules, and now let's talk about, eliminating Congress and making a king or whatever. Can that kind of thing happen? Can there be changes?
So, I mean, that's a 2-part question. Could anybody make that suggestion? Look, I'm from California. There's going to be a bunch of insane, hard leftists from California that are going to come in and try and do that stuff. Yep. And that stuff, by the way, happens in Congress every day as well. It will be ruled out of order or non-germane because there are 3, in order to convention, 34 states have to agree to a limited subject matter. They all have to agree to the exact same thing. Every state is passing the exact same resolution. So will people try to do that stuff? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably some of the delegates from New York or California, Illinois, they're going to try to do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But you'll have 34 states that will have agreed in advance to a limited subject matter.
With that in mind, I have a separate question. Does that mean that every state gets a number of representatives proportion to their population, like in the Congress, or do they get the same number of representatives like in the Senate?
So every state will choose their own commission. They're called commissioners or delegates. Every state will choose their own commissioners, however they want to choose them. The legislature is in charge of that, and they can send as many as they like, but each state gets 1 vote. And so whether it's New York or New Hampshire, the states get 1 vote.
Got it. Okay. So California can't get together with like New York and Florida and Texas and take over the world. Doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work that way because the states are coming together. Remember, it's called a convention of states. The states are attending as sovereign entities. They're not attending as delegations or people, but populations. It's specifically called a convention of states.
Got it. Sarah says, hello from Minnesota. Thank you both for your time and your fight towards more liberty. Thank you, Sarah. I guess we have fans, Mark. Look at that. We have fans. I like it. Brad says, just how far can Article 5 go as to reduce the corruption perpetrated by politicians in federal government? What can be done about all these corrupt, unelected people, FBI, DOJ, CDC, FDA, etc.? Now, you did mention this, Mark, the idea that you could limit not just the elected officials, but also deep state. Does that mean, to Brad's point, does that mean you can limit them, eliminate them, change them? How much power could this convention have on this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot you could do. So I'll give a few specifics of things that I like. They're not necessarily going to come out of a convention, but here's things that I would propose if I was a delegate to the convention. One would be to get rid of corruption. I would say if you ever serve in federal elected office of any kind, or if you serve inside a federal agency and get a paycheck from the federal government of any kind, other than military service, that you are barred for life from lobbying the federal government. This revolving door creates an incentive for corruption, and we could do it. The American people hate that, by the way. They know about it, they hate it, and there's nothing they can do about it. So we could create a constitutional provision that prohibits that. Another way is by term limiting these folks. The longer they're there, the deeper their influence and their corruption runs. And then another way is by getting rid of a bunch of those agencies. The corruption comes because the federal government has too much power. A balanced budget amendment would do that as well. Less money in Washington, D.C., less corruption. So there's a lot we can do to address the corruption.
Wow. I hope that answers your question, Brad. That's great. So if we limited, say you said you could only be, whatever, in the FBI for 10 years or whatever is the thing, does that mean you have to bring in leadership from other places?
Yeah, I think it does. I think what you end up with is more private sector coming in, and private sector that doesn't intend to profit off it when they come out. So it's going to require a certain kind of public servant. Can you imagine that people are actually going in for public service?
I don't know. Public servant. I don't know what that is, Mark. I don't understand. Is that English? I don't even know what that is. Public servant.
We can structurally build that back into our system. And so, I think it would cause turnover. That would be super healthy. And we already have decent turnover at the very top of most of these agencies because they're political appointees. So those will turn over with administrations, but it's below the top levels, the next 5 levels down or so. Those folks are permanent infrastructure. That's where we saw the quote unquote resistance develop during the Trump administration.
I think, and I bring this up often. If you look at, and I bring up the opposites on purpose. If you look at George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, Democrat Republican, versus Barack Obama and Donald Trump, Democrat Republican, whether you like either of their policies, both Bush and Clinton had a better first term because they were governors. They knew the corruption, they knew how things worked, and they were able to come in and kind of deal with the deep state and kind of deal with it better and get through. Obama and Trump both struggled their first terms because the deep state was so strong. They didn't know they had to deal with. They didn't know how to deal with that monster of a deep state. Neither of them knew how to deal with it.
Yeah, and interestingly for me, in my sort of political coming of age, Obama was a turning point. It was the end of the Bush administration. And this goes to my history as a Tea Party guy. We were all racist. We were all reactionary to Obama, blah, blah, blah. For me, my political enlightenment began when George Bush said he was going to abandon the free market principles to save the free market. And I just thought, what kind of rabbit hole have we fallen down?
Right, absolutely.
That's like a children's book or something, right?
Yes.
And then, look, I was not a fan of Obama. I did not vote for Obama. And when Obama got elected, however, there's 2 things that I would say. One is, as an American, if you didn't have a sense of pride that America had elected its first African-American president, I think that's weird. Like that's an amazing watershed moment in American history. By the way, no country on earth that's a majority white country other than the United States has done that. This is kind of this amazing watershed moment. Now, remember, politically, I'm thinking, I don't like the guy, but still you have a watershed moment, number 1. Number 2 is it's by a good margin. And so you think we're going to see some real change in Washington, D.C. Remember, he said, we're not going to have the bankers in the White House. We're not going to have the lobbyists.
That's right. Remember?
In 5 minutes, the White House was filled with bankers and lobbyists. And it honestly terrified me. I just thought, okay, so the people vote for dramatic change and they get the exact same thing. That's when I started to realize something was seriously amiss with our federal government.
Well, it's funny. You said the same time frame for me, similar but different reason. I thought Obama was going to be a rebel. I bought the hope
agree.
and change. I bought it. I bought it. I was like, that's delicious. Can I have some more hope and change? It was delicious. I thought, oh my God, it's the end. We're going to actually fix things. This guy's different. He's not like the rest. Boy, was I wrong. And for me, because in the past, I was always voting rebel. I voted Nader. Yep. I voted Perot, right? I was that guy. I hate you. I'm going to vote the rebel. That was me. I thought Obama was a rebel.
I agree.
And then when he was just like the rest, I got to tell you, I turned off. I was done. I was like, I'm betrayed. It's over. I wasn't going to vote again. So that's why when I was telling you earlier about Tea Party people who had left, I can respect that because I was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done. He's just like all the rest of them. I'm out. What brought me back was the libertarian movement. That's what got me, right? Libertarian movement got me back in. Before that, I was out. So I get that part completely. So this is why I love the idea of you walking down this road to make real change. So let me move to the next step if I could. Assuming that we make change on like the FBI or the DOJ or the CDC, as Brad says, does the convention have a way to replace or refill or any of that? Or does it not matter and it shouldn't? What happens when there is, let's say they get a bit radical and they, trash the FBI just being like, 3 guys in the office, whatever, something like that, right?
My dream. Yeah.
I know. I'm not mad about this. I'm just saying what happens next.
I think this is really interesting. I think one of the things is we have an underlying premise that we need all this stuff at the level of the federal government. And where we get that premise is from the government itself, but we also get it from the media industrial complex, right? So if you and I, if we watch, whether it's Fox News or MSNBC, name your media of choice, you watch it, they're completely focused on Washington, D.C. Right? Nobody's really paying attention to what's going on in the states or the local level. Yep. So the premise is that all the decisions, all the important stuff, all the big stuff has to happen in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And it's completely untrue. Absolutely. Whatever your political persuasion, and I'm going to go far away from myself right now and assume that I'm very left. Okay. I'm a conservative primarily. Assume I'm a complete leftist and I live in California and I want really tight environmental regulations. I want really tight labor regulations. I want a really big welfare state. Well, California has all that. They can do all that. So why do they need the federal government? And the answer is they don't, and they shouldn't. And in fact, at the end of a convention of states, what would happen if you do away with the FBI, then there's that law enforcement authority is at the state level. The FBI has a few functions that they need to conduct. It's an interstate law enforcement agency. I mean, people need to understand the reason for the FBI literally came out of a series of bank robberies that were being perpetrated on state lines intentionally. Because if you robbed a bank close to the state line and you drove from New York into New Jersey, the police couldn't chase you. Right. And so you needed a federal law enforcement agency with interstate jurisdiction. There's still some need for that, but it's very limited compared to what the FBI does. Yeah, but so we could gut it and return it all to the state.
Here's the problem, Mark, you're missing here. Who is going to make fake sting operations to put innocent people in jail?
Yeah, that is the point. And I would say, Larry, to be fair, I think New York's going to be pretty good at that, and California.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, New York will be good at it. You're right. Okay, yeah. You're right. The states will fill that void. Okay, we're good. We're good. All good. So I guess what you're saying then is we won't need it, right? That there'll be an answer. We won't actually need to have it filled, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I want to give you a historic reference for that too, because I'm become, as I got involved in politics, a big student of the founding era. And in the founding and framing era, there's the Hamilton versus Jefferson debate. Most people who studied this era at all are super familiar. Hamilton, 100%. New York, big government guy, big city guy, right? And Jefferson.
By the way, a little bit of a little trivia piece. He's buried here downtown Manhattan.
So a true New Yorker, right?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Then and now. And then you've got Jefferson, who's an agrarian, an agriculture guy, a farm guy from Virginia. And we all know, the debates like this, they're different on everything. But what most people don't realize is they agreed on something called exclusive spheres of influence. And when they talked about that, what they meant is if a state can do it, the federal government can't. And if the federal government can do it, a state can't. Because otherwise it just didn't make any sense. How could a federal government regulate banking and a state regulate banking? How would the banks know what to do? It doesn't make any sense. Or in our case, the environment or healthcare or energy or on and on and on. And so the bottom line is everything that you could potentially want to regulate, and for me, that's not a lot, but everything you could potentially want to regulate can and is already being done at the state level. We don't need this stuff at the federal level.
Right. Good. Okay. Sebastian says, boy, do we need that balanced budget now more than ever with this debt ceiling raise the negotiating now. Yes, 100%. We could fix a lot of this. We could end the need for a debt ceiling, 100%.
Yeah, and one of the things I think it's important when we're talking about the debt ceiling, I'm watching this debate closely. It was going on in the early days of the Tea Party movement when I was there in Washington, D.C. One of the things that I want to remember is we get really mad at the guys in D.C., but human beings are incentive machines, right?
Yes.
So we set up incentives and then we act according to incentives. You, again, as a business guy, know this better than anybody. So if you put an incentive, there's a profit out there. We can make that profit. We're going to seek that profit because that's our incentive. In Washington, D.C., there's no incentive to cut the budget. It's a philosophical incentive, right? And which is very weak. In other words, it's the right thing to do for future generations. But people are not going to make hard decisions without an incentive. So putting a balanced budget amendment in place means that the politicians can say, it's not my fault. I mean, this is now in the Constitution. We have to make cuts. So I'm going to now make the hard decisions that I would rather not make. There's an outside incentive that imposes upon their decision making.
Absolutely. Dave says the lawyers in Washington have granted themselves power. Well, he's not wrong. Yes.
Yeah. Let me add to that a lot of it, the lawyers are the lawyers who sit on the courts. And so if the lawyers who sit on the courts say, the government overstepped. Oh, no, because that's in the Commerce Clause. And this is a really important one for your viewers. Most government power at the federal level now, a huge amount of it comes out of the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause was this little tiny thing in the Constitution that said the federal government has power to regulate interstate commerce. This tiny little thing, right? And what they meant, and this is specific to New York, it's really important. New York and New Jersey were in an actual trade war at the time of the 1787 convention, a war that was about to become a shooting war over tariffs that New York was imposing because most foreign goods came in through New York's harbor. Right. And so New Jersey said, hey, we're not paying those tariffs. We're not going to have more expensive goods just because you want to impose tariffs on those things. So they're about to go to war. And so the guys in that convention are like, this is not going to work. We can't go to war over interstate trade. So we're going to give you this power. Interstate at the time means the same thing, but the words regulate and commerce actually mean something different. In 1787, regulate means to regularize or to smooth over.
Make regular.
That's it. They don't know anything about regulations the way that we do. There's no federal register and all this stuff. And
it was to make sure that we knew what a pound was.
That's
it.
And
we knew how much $1 was and how long a foot was.
That's exactly
stuff like that.
Smooth it out. Let's not fight about this stuff. And then the word commerce means the shipment of goods. So we think of commerce as anything that's business, that's very broad. They just thought, you guys need to smooth out or regularize the movement of goods across state lines. So now the power for regulating education, being involved in education, healthcare, energy, the environment, almost anything you can think of comes out of cases that interpret the Commerce Clause. Yeah. And I'll give you the best specific example. So Jefferson is a huge proponent of public education. He believed in an educated populace. He's founding up University of Virginia. He's writing letters with his friend William Henry Lee. And Lee says, you should get federal money for UVA. This is going to be really great and really important. Jefferson writes back and says, that's unconstitutional. You'd need an education amendment. Well, we don't have one, but we spend hundreds of billions of dollars, in my opinion, unconstitutionally on education because of Commerce Clause interpretation. Yes. We can fix that in a convention.
I'll give you a horrible one. Example, a criminal. A friend of mine is in Queens. He is working politics in Queens. New York State and New York State law says you may run for office and you may be a political consultant at the same time. Right. That is legal in New York City and in New York State. It's a legal thing. He was doing that. But he used his cell phone while he was doing it. And the Fed said, it is possible that when you made a phone call, that phone call bounced off of another state's tower invoking the Commerce Clause, and they arrested him and they
Yeah.
charged him because federally you can't do that.
Right.
So they then said, well, no, we're now going to charge you because federally you can't do that. So they charged him federally. The judges were like, yeah, that's totally fine. To your point, the Commerce Clause put a buddy of mine in jail when he did something that was, and by the way, everything he did was literally in New York City. Everyone he talked to was in New York City. Everyone he dealt with is in New York City. Where he did his work was in New York City. He's born in New York City. Everything's New York City. And so totally legal in New York City. Bloomberg did it. Literally, Bloomberg did it while he was in New York City. Put him in jail because of the Commerce Clause.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the Commerce Clause. We can fix that with a convention of states.
I like that. Catherine says, we the people can make a difference. Our state representatives need to hear from us regularly on the issues. Absolutely. So let me ask you a specific question on this.
Yeah.
One of my friends, he was asking, see if I can get his specific question. He wrote it out. He was so concerned. He wanted to make sure that I got it right to you. He says, ask Mark, what about a strategy to turn at least 33 more states to become citizen ballot initiative states, giving their votes the option and the right to place their own initiatives on the ballot to ratify their own amendments in their state constitutions, then have the citizens initiate a constitutional amendment to make the convention of states, like that route. What do you think of that kind of route?
There's two layers to that question, and I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale because I come from California, and I understand why people like, and I initially did like the idea of propositions. In some states, they're called initiatives, depending on the process. I like citizen-driven.
Oh, you were going to make Roger angry right now. Go ahead. Keep going.
I know I am. And I'm going to ask him to look at what happened in California, where we now have hundreds, literally, of constitutional amendments. Because what happens is huge moneyed interests realize, citizen amendments or citizen propositions, we can spend the millions of dollars it takes to get these things on the ballot. We can spend then the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars it takes to pass the things we want. And then that system potentially ends up getting used against you. So I would be interested if we could figure out a system where we could prevent that from happening. But if you look at California, every single year there are ballot propositions on, and they always end up being things that you and I would hate as either libertarians or conservatives, because it's the big liberal interests that spend the money to get these things on and passed. So that's phase one. I'm skeptical of it unless we could figure out a way to limit it. Phase two, about saying, well, we could do convention of states through the proposition process. You can't do it because the United States Constitution says it's the state legislatures that have to call the convention.
Okay.
So that's according to the U.S. Constitution.
Got it. Okay. So you wouldn't be able to because of that. Okay. Thank you. At least you answered his question. He's mad at you now, but at least you answered his question. So it's good. It's totally fine. It's all good.
And
Michael
by the way,
says,
I'm actually, so I just want to I want to make sure we catch the nuance there. There's a problem with it. If we can figure out a way around that problem, I'm in favor of it. I like folks being able to weigh in and have a way around their government when the government gets corrupt.
There we go. Michael says, here in Ohio, we have a vote in August on a resolution to raise the amendment to the Ohio Constitution to a supermajority of voters. Well, there we go. Ohio, has Ohio said yes to this yet, or they're still working on it?
They haven't. And that fight that he's talking about, I'm very engaged in. And I think it's really important. So think about this. In Ohio right now, 51% of people can vote to change their constitution. I mean, that just seems crazy. For the United States Constitution, it takes 2/3 to even talk about it. And then it takes 3/4 to ratify an amendment. And we're saying in Ohio, it's 51%. That really concerns me because what you don't want to do is make it really easy to amend your constitution, because the Constitution is supposed to be the anchor point of the law,
right?
Whether we're in a state or the United States. So I can tell you that we support that 60% change. I think it's really important. I'd actually probably be in favor of a higher threshold.
Well, there we go, Michael. There we go. We got some good questions here. There we go. I love that. So Roger goes on. He says, what about national ballot initiatives, the amendment of U.S. Constitution to allow voters to place their own initiatives, a national citizen initiative? That's almost stopping the Article 5, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it would require to do that would require a constitutional amendment first. In other words, you would have to amend the Constitution to make that a way in which you could amend the Constitution. I just don't think there would be the public support for it. that's something akin. This is a rabbit hole we may or may not want to go down, but that's akin to something like the national popular vote, right? So they're trying to turn things into a popular vote. The fear of that, if you read the writings of the founders and the framers of the Constitution, they hated direct democracy. And the reason they didn't like direct democracy is direct democracy historically has always led to mob rule. In other words, it's the tyranny of the majority. No minority rights end up being protected. If it's just whoever has the most votes, then the majority is always going to outvote the minority and strip them of their rights.
There we go. Mary Ellen's on your side. She says, drain the swamp. Sign the petition today. There we go. So we got someone on your side. I like that. Absolutely. We answered Brad's question. He says, thank you. So we answered his question well. So yes, absolutely. We're all good with that. So then let me ask then, are there politicians who do support this? I mean, I feel like in a way you're almost kind of push it into their realm. I feel like naturally they'd be like, Mark, get out of here. This is our house, right? What are you doing? You're in our house. Are there some that are like, no, come on in. We're happy to have you in here.
Well, so obviously we're doing this in state legislatures. So we've passed in 19 out of the necessary 34 states. So a lot of state legislators are in support of this. And at the federal level, mostly we haven't gone after endorsements because it's not a federal thing, right? It's the states that do it. But there are notable folks that have decided they wanted to step up. So on the libertarian side, Rand Paul is an endorser of ours. Which kind of makes sense, right? Because he's a guy that says we should get rid of federal power. I mean, as a libertarian, that's right in his wheelhouse. Obviously, his dad, one of the original libertarians in Congress. And so Rand himself is a big endorser and supporter of what we're doing. Marco Rubio, who's kind of much more moderate, is an endorser and supporter of what we're doing.
Wow, I wouldn't expect that. I feel like Rubio's an establishment guy.
Good for him. He is, but he doesn't love Washington, D.C. Another guy that's a big supporter of ours, very current, obviously, is Governor DeSantis. Believes in taking power away from D.C. Now, he's a governor, so that makes sense as a governor. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's actually one of my favorite candidates out there right now.
That makes sense.
One of the smartest guys. He's in favor of this. So there are a lot of candidates, a lot of prominent public officials that have signed on. People can go to conventionofstates.com/endorsers and see all the folks that have endorsed this.
There we go. Mr. Austin Elsler, says, do we know if Kentucky is doing okay in the COS project? I know we have bills on the table in our General Assembly, but I'm not hearing a lot of action in our state from our COS people.
Yeah, and you could thank Mitch McConnell for that, the ultimate establishment politician, literally.
Mr. Establishment.
I mean, this is literal that I've been told by legislators in the Kentucky legislature who support us that they are told directly by Mitch McConnell to stay away from using Article 5, and he controls all the cash flow into that state. So if you cross Uncle Mitch, who I call the turtle, you cross the turtle, you're not going to get political money. So I think he's going to have to retire before we move in Kentucky. But I can tell you the people there support it. The majority of the legislature supports it. It's just he's got a lot of power.
Yeah, he is literally Mr. Establishment. That's for sure. Absolutely. So Linda's mad at me, I think. She says, you were naive. I know who Obama was from the beginning. Maybe, Linda, but you know what? Sometimes you want to believe. So yes, I was optimistic. I was naive. I wanted to believe that we could have change and it would work. I wanted to believe it. So I did.
Yeah, look, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I didn't like his policies, but I would say I was naive. I didn't think he was going to have all these bankers and lobbyists in the White House. And so I would say I was naive too. Look, I was naive. I believed Congress would change when we elected this huge wave in 2010. So I think when you first really get seriously engaged in politics, it's not abnormal to be naive. You know, what I find is every year I'm engaged in politics, I get more and more cynical. And then I think I can't be any more cynical. And then somebody does something and I become more cynical.
Yes. Yes. But I got to tell you, one of the reasons why I ran for governor a second time was because when I saw how bad it was when I ran the first time.
Yeah.
I was super naive running compared to what I am now. Oh my God, I knew nothing. Right. So when I ran in 2018 and I did for a libertarian in New York State, let's make a caveat there. I did amazing, right? I got more votes than Alaska did by times 6. I raised $500,000. I mean, I got ballot access for the party.
Dude, the fact that you qualified for the ballot is unbelievable to me.
Yes. So I did great. However, man, was it hard, and it was uphill, and it was corrupt, and it was nasty, and it made me want to run again. Because to your point, I was like, no, this is just, no, I'm doing it again because you guys were so mean to me. So I'm doing it again. You can't get rid of me.
No, look, I feel the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And for a couple of reasons. One is, and again, I think you and I are wired the same way this way. Like, you go around New York, and one of the things I like about you and watching you is that you're a regular guy. Like, you relate to regular people. You don't have a desire to be part of the ruling elite. You actually want to serve regular people. And so you believe in people. And I've traveled a bunch all over New York. Like, I meet great people everywhere I go. I live in Texas, and Texans, or if you go to Oklahoma or whatever, they look at New York and they dismiss it. And they just think, oh, it's a bunch of crazy leftists. Well, yes, they're there, and they're in California.
They
too.
are.
But there's a bunch of awesome Americans who believe in liberty and freedom. And so I'm always going to fight for those people, whether it's New York or Illinois or New Jersey or California. I'm not giving up anywhere.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not going to cede territory to the people that want to take away fundamental liberties from the American people.
There we go. Well, you have someone who likes you. Patty says, this man is extremely intelligent. Oh, like that. And likes dogs, clearly.
Yeah, apparently the dogs like you too.
There we go. Yes. She says, I bet he played Dungeons and Dragons with Larry. That's good. I like that. Thank you, Patty. I appreciate it. Good joke. So yes. Brad asked an important question too, though. What about White House executive orders? And the thing about that, which is most people don't know this, I'm sure you do, but the origin of the executive order wasn't to make law. It was to explain how you would carry out a law. So they would say the law is you must do X. The executive order would say, okay, here is how we execute X. It's not X, it's Y. That's not what it was supposed to be. Can this affect that also, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and part of the problem we have is we don't have a good constitutional definition of an executive order. Everybody knew what it was intended to be, and then it was abused. And I think this is really important for people to understand. Obama abused it, Trump abused it, Biden's abusing it, and we need to stuff it back in the box constitutionally. And you can absolutely do that with an amendment limiting the power of the president to use executive orders.
There we go. Mike brings up Hamilton's buried in Trinity Church in Manhattan, Wall Street area. That's true. Yes, right across from. If anybody wants, I'm going to give you. You should not move to live in New York City. It is terrible. However, you should absolutely come visit. New York City is an amazing place to visit. You absolutely should. And one of the things anyone who comes to New York City should do when they come here, you should do a walking tour of Wall Street. People don't do it. It is amazing. And one of the places you will go to is the Trinity Church, which is down by Wall Street, and you will see where Hamilton is buried. So yes, walking tour Wall Street. If you go to Manhattan, you can't beat it. The history is amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah, you know, and I've been there and I've seen a bunch of it. And I think one of the things, this again, remember I said people from other parts of the country who are conservative or libertarian, they'll dismiss New York.
Yep.
I think people forget how central New York is in American history, in the founding era. And because they see Manhattan as what it is now, not as the empty island it was back then, not as a battle places and battlefields in the American Revolution, and major figures in the American Revolution were there, and how important it was, and the culture of New York on the fight for liberty was incredibly important. And so I think we forget that because it's become a liberal place now. But I don't think we should. Again, this is important to me. I'm not going to cede the history of New York to the leftists. I'm not going to let them erase it. It is fundamental and pivotal to founding American history.
There we go. There we go. Let me do a little bit, if I could, of admin again. Guys, if you are watching this, you like what you're hearing, please click that like button. It's important that you click that button. Again, we got to get past the algorithms. It does matter. They always try to shadow ban me, but the more you click the like, the better off we're going to be if you like this stuff. If you are actually watching on Twitter, please retweet this right now. I bug you all the time. Why? Because you're not doing it. So do it, and I will stop bugging you. Retweet this right now. If you want your comment to come to the front, you can super chat. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, you can just super chat. It's fine. If you want to support the show directly, please go ahead. Patreon.com/Sharpway. Tell me $10 a month so we can keep this going on. I'll do less consulting and more of this. And finally,
You know what?
Mark
Before you, can I jump in right there for a second, Larry?
please.
It's so important to me because I don't do what you do. What you do is way harder than what I do, I think.
Well,
And
like
guys
that.
like you that are out there talking about this stuff every single day and spreading the message and bypassing the censorship machine are critical if we're going to save the country. And
Yes.
so when I come on venues like this, look, I mean, this is honest truth. I might get in trouble for saying this tonight. I got a call from Mark Levin's producer tonight. I said, sorry, I'm already booked. I got something important.
Look at that. Oh,
Right?
thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank
so,
you. Yes.
and this is important to me. Guys like you who are on the internet that are talking about this stuff every day. It's not the big stars. I hope you become a big star. This is
One day.
hard. It's hard work. It is public service. It is dedication. And that means you got to click the like button. You got to click the follow button. You got to retweet it. You got to go to Patreon and give the money. Without guys like you, I promise you, we're not going to save the country.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Listen to what Mark says. Click that damn like button. Yes, absolutely. But also give him some love. Follow him. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Meckler, and or go see what he's doing over at conventionofstates.com. Go see what's going on. Check out who's supporting him. If it makes sense, help out. If it makes sense to you, go ahead and help out. It does matter. Every little bit counts. So I want to go to one other point that people have brought up, which is the idea that one state, one vote. And then the idea that Raj brought up, the idea of making, not one state, one vote, but popular vote. Is there an argument that says it's not fair? It's California has a bazillion people and Wyoming has 5. It's not fair. Is that a fair problem or issue or concern?
Look, I would say it's very emotionally appealing, but emotionally appealing doesn't make it fair. I mean, part of the genius of the framers of our Constitution is they understood that we had to have a system that was mixed. So you had the House of Representatives, which is apportioned by population. That was important because it's only fair that at least in part of your government that the states with the bigger populations have more influence. And New York or California or Ohio, they have big populations. Texas, they're going to have more influence in the House of Representatives. But they also understood that if the small states had proportional representation everywhere, then why would they even participate in this system of governance? Because they would always be outvoted. So if you think about a convention of states, why would small states even want to participate in a convention where the big states can just dominate? They wouldn't. And in fact, this is interesting because it's not in the Constitution that it's one state, one vote. It's not written there. But we actually have had over 40 conventions of states in American history, not under Article 5, but for other purposes.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, for example, a really important one is New York, New Jersey. There was an interstate convention that negotiated the New York, New Jersey Compact by which you govern interstate law enforcement and interstate transportation. So that's an interstate convention. Every state always had one vote in these. When we do a lot of the state boundaries are done that way. The Colorado River Compact that governs Colorado was done this way. And they always do it one state, one vote, because otherwise the small states simply won't participate. It wouldn't be fair for them. So we've done this 41 times in American history, 11 times before the convention of 1787, approximately 30 since, always one state, one vote. There was one time when the states had a debate about this, and they said, we should see if we want to switch it. Do we want to be proportional? They had that vote on a one state, one vote basis. And of course, the small states defeated the big states on that. So this is the way it's always been. It's the only way small states would ever participate.
Got it. Makes sense. So let me ask you, you have 19 states now who've said yes? Is that right?
It's, I'm going to say 20. Kansas passed
20,
it this year, but they have a weird restriction in their state constitution that says that they require a 2/3 vote. That's not constitutional under the U.S. Constitution. It's a limitation on the exercise of a constitutional right under Article 5. So we'll be litigating that. That will be state number 20.
So then what can we expect realistically? I know I'm not asking for a guarantee.
Yeah.
You've been doing this for a year or two, so you kind of know what's going on a bit, right? A couple years here. Yep. What can we expect as an outcome and results? Like, do you think we'll have it in a year, 2 years? What's your gut say? What do you think? What can we expect?
Right now, I would say realistically 2028. I think we could shoot for. I think that's a realistic time frame. We're at 19. at some point, the momentum just breaks loose. We start to get
Right.
close, and a lot of states come on board. Also, the worse things get in Washington, D.C., the closer we get, the more people just throw up their hands and say, okay, we got to do this. So I think
Absolutely.
we can get it done by 2028, probably we get in convention.
And what would you guess would be the actual results? In other words, I'll tell you my feeling. This is just my personal opinion from an outsider looking in. I think it's going to be sooner than 2028 because I think there's a tipping point.
Yes.
And when that hits, everybody says yes. Like they're like, we're done. This is a disaster. Let's just do this. It's fine. And I think it's going to be like 2026. That's just my opinion. I have no data, just my gut. That's
You're making my heart thump, Larry.
Yes. And I guess the other issue is what do I think the outcome will be? And what I think the outcome is, no matter what is, once we have won, people will start thinking about change.
Yes.
So regardless of how successful, whoever defines success in this case, the convention is, I feel like that's going to be the changes everything. We're going to stop wanting to fight each other. We're going to be like, let's just do conventions then. Let's fix this stuff. Come on. Let's do another one. We did one last week. Let's do another one tomorrow. Like, we're going to want to keep doing it. That's my gut. Do you think I'm wrong on this? What do you think?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Because a big part of the fear that we hear is we've never done this before. We have no idea what's going to happen. So once you've done it, you have an idea of what's going to happen, and it becomes much easier to do it. I absolutely agree with that. And by the way, the framers intended for this to happen every so often. They figured, I think they'd be appalled that we haven't done it for over 200 years and we have all these problems. Federal government's grown outside the box. So I agree with you. And I think what comes out of convention is nothing that would scare anybody, to be honest with you. And we polled a lot of this. I know where the support is. We're going to get some form of a balanced budget amendment. We're going to get some form of term limits. I don't know exactly what those will look like, but those are coming out of convention. Here's another one that comes out for sure that doesn't get talked about much. It's called a single subject rule. So that
yes.
Right. So you can't have 3,000 page bills coming out of Congress that nobody knows what they're like. That's probably 95% of the American public would support that. So these are common sense reforms that are not partisan, right? It's not partisan to say we should balance the budget. Look, there might be a partisan fight on the other end. You get a balanced budget amendment. Now have to decide, are we limiting defense? Are we limiting welfare? What are we limiting? That's where the partisan fight comes in. But the idea that we can't keep borrowing forever, that's widely held in the American public. So I think those are the kind of things that have high probability of coming out of convention.
Jim Walker, you just made him excited. He goes, single subject legislation. He's excited, so that works. But the Silver Dreaming Wolf says that's why grassroots is so important. And I think I completely agree. Once this happens, I think more people will have hope. I think so many people have checked out. I see this across the state. And some people don't know this. In some parts of upstate New York, only 1 in 6 New Yorkers votes. They've just checked out. They're like, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Nothing changes. It doesn't matter. But I think this kind of thing could get people to go, wait a minute. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So there is hope. Let me get involved again.
I agree with that. 2 things I want to add there. Number one, Silver Dreaming Wolf, who just weighed in. She's one of, I would call her a super activist. She's one of the best people in the country working for convention estates. If you don't know her, you should know her. She has a beautiful We the People tattoo on her forearm. Just an incredible woman, not just in New York, but working in the entire Northeast. So love you, Silver. Thanks for writing in. She's somebody you should know, Larry. And I would close with this, which is with hope. Look, I have hope because I know the American people. I have hope in New York because I know people like you, Larry, and people like Silver and a lot of other, Marianne, and a lot of other people. I think she wrote in earlier that I know. I've been up and down that state on every corner. I've been up in upstate New York. I know what those people are like. By the way, the people in the country in upstate New York are exactly like people in Texas, right? So, I mean, these are a lot of them God-fearing, country-loving, proud Americans. They're not what people see in the media when they think, oh, that's a liberal Manhattanite. And I would say, having spent a lot of time in Manhattan and all parts of New York, there are great citizens all over New York. I don't care where you are. I'm not writing off Manhattan. I'm not writing off the Upper East Side, or wherever you are in New York. You're going to find great patriots in that state, in those cities. So I'm not ever giving up, and I've got a lot of hope for America.
So let me ask the last question then, which is right in line with what you talked about. Is this the answer? meaning you see it, I see it, we all see it. The country's divided, more divided than at least I could ever remember in my lifetime, for sure.
Yeah.
It's divided. Is this a way? If this works, does it bring us together? The reverse. If it works, does it tear us apart? If it doesn't work, does it tear us apart? Does it bring us together? What's your view on this?
This is the only way that I know to bring the country together. And I came to this conclusion. I didn't mean to be honest with you. It's not self-serving. I started thinking about America coming apart, and I started doing a bunch of research on when has America been coming apart? When have we been at each other's throats? When have we disliked each other? And I literally started to research this theme of the states not liking each other. And what I found out, Larry, really shocked me, because the period in which the states have not liked each other is all of American history, literally every bit of it. And if you go to, for example, pre-founding of the country, the colonies hated each other.
Yep.
If you go post-Revolutionary War, we disliked each other so much, we came up with the Articles of Confederation, which said, I'm not going to give any other state power over my state at all because I don't trust you and I don't like you. We hated each other so much after the Constitution was drafted and ratified that ultimately we got into a civil war and we forced half the country into the Union. I mean, the country has been coming apart as long as we've been a country. And so the question is, well, how have we managed to stay together for almost 250 years? And the answer is literally found in the Constitution itself, because the Constitution was specifically designed for a country where people don't like each other, because it says this: we're going to come together for a limited amount of things because we don't really like each other and we don't really agree with each other on most stuff. So New York can be New York and Texas can be Texas. And then for everything that we have to do together, it's a limited amount of stuff: foreign policy, foreign trade, stuff like that. We'll do that stuff together, interstate highways, because we have to. Everything else, we're just going to go our separate ways because we don't really like each other. And so what a convention does is it answers the question, who decides, with we the people in the states mostly decide. And if we do that, it's literally like pulling that little pressure thing off the top of a pressure cooker. The pressure goes out, because right now, the more decisions we make in DC, the more half of us are pissed off. When it's Biden and a liberal Congress, I'm mad. When it's Trump and a conservative Congress, then liberals are mad. When the Supreme Court is more liberal, I'm frustrated. When they're more conservative, liberals are mad. So let's take that power away from DC, give it back to the states, and relieve the pressure. That's how we keep the country together.
That's an answer. I love it. Mike agrees. Mike says, term limits, balanced budget, single subject rule. I think those are the main three things we can get together as a country from all sides. 100%. I agree. 100%. Well, Mark, I want to say thank you so much for giving me so much of your time this evening. I appreciate it.
Hey, anytime. Let's do it again. I love being with you, Larry.
There we go. And everyone for watching, look, thank you so much for giving me a chunk of your time. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, click that like button. It does matter. I know I keep bugging you because it does matter. And give Mark some love. He gave us a whole hour tonight when he could have been doing other cool stuff, but he said he was hanging out with us being cool. So give him some love too. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Meckler, and check out what he's doing over at conventionofstates.com. If you like what you see, if it makes sense to you, support him, help out. Just do it. Just go check it out no matter what. If you like it, help out. That's what matters. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for this evening. I'll be back on tomorrow evening again at 7 p.m. I will see you all